just like baby on the treetop when the wind blows.
How did the Tom and Jerry show end? Oh boy, how do I even begin talking about Tom and Jerry? You know, it wasn't a part of our childhood, it was our entire childhood. I am over 30 and I still go back to Tom and Jerry after watching a horror movie. And this sound, this one, I am pretty sure I am taking it to my grave. I guess if some things are gonna outlive evolution, it's cockroaches and the Tom and Jerry cartoon. Anyway, the thing is, Tom and Jerry has dropped several shows over decades, and back then we did not even realize how each show ended because our beloved cat and mouse kept popping up on the screen. But the truth is, if you dig deep enough, you'd realize that Tom and Jerry has multiple endings across generations. And in today's video, I am going to discuss all of those. The focus of this video will be on the Tom and Jerry shows since the theatrical film started. Alright, let's get into it. The beginning of a legendary show. Tom and Jerry has one of the most humble beginnings and has gone on to become Hanna-Barbera's greatest success story. Believe it or not, the cartoon's name, which now rolls off our tongues as if it has always existed, actually started with a different name. Let's rewind to 1937. Joseph Barbera, a storyman and an animator, got a job at the then largest studio in Hollywood, MGM. While working there, he learned that co-owner Louis B. Mayer wanted to boost the animation department and was encouraging young artists to develop some new cartoon characters. Barbera then decided to team up with William Hanna, an animator and colleague from the harmonizing department, and the two pitched a few ideas. One of them was about a cartoon having two equally matched characters who were always in conflict with each other. And after much discussion, they settled on a cat and a mouse, and thankfully, the then head of the short film department, Fred Quimby, reluctantly greenlit their idea to produce one cartoon short after the failure of Milt Gross's cartoon. Barbera said in an interview, "Yeah, it was within the first 2 years. We finally ended up in the same room and I could see the boat slowly sinking. I suggested, why don't we do a picture on our own? Quimby was so desperate, he didn't stop us." That's how Tom and Jerry began, as a short titled Puss Gets the Boot. It had 3 characters, a cat named Jasper, a mouse called Jinx during pre-production, and Mammy Two Shoes, an African-American housemaid. Finally, in February 1940, the short was released onto the theater circuit. But that's all. Hanna and Barbera were then ordered to stop investing their time into these characters and focus on other cartoons like Officer Pooch and Gallopin' Gals. However, a Texas businesswoman named Bessa changed that. She sent a letter to MGM asking whether any more of the cat and mouse shorts would be produced. In the meantime, Puss Gets the Boot also earned an Academy Award nomination in 1941 for Best Short Subject Cartoons. Barbera said it was nominated for an Oscar, which surprised Mayer, who was not used to getting that kind of acclaim for his cartoons. This positive feedback finally convinced the management to commission a series. How did Tom and Jerry get their name? When Hanna and Barbera finally began working on their brainchild, they had not yet decided on the characters' names, but they wanted to make the process interactive and create hype for the upcoming cartoon, so they held a competition to name the characters. Barbera stated, "We had a whole bunch of contests to get the title for the series." Very unoriginal title. They held the contest in the studio, and reportedly an animator, John Carr, suggested that the cat be called Tom and the mouse be named Jerry. Carr then won the first prize, and some accounts suggest that the name was inspired by Damon Runyon's 1932 story. Runyon in turn took the name from a stage play from 1821 by William Moncrief, which was an adaptation of Egan's book titled Life in London. The term was actually common in 19th century England, where Tom and Jerry was used to refer to drunkards or gamblers. Now, after the name was finalized, Hanna and Barbera started working on the second short titled The Midnight Snack. And for over 15 years, the duo kept producing Tom and Jerry shorts and creating a total of 114 theatrical shorts for MGM. Tom and Jerry, 1941 to 1958. This was one of the most glorious days of Tom and Jerry. 13 shorts of the cartoon were nominated for an Academy Award, and the cat and mouse even bagged 7 of them. Tom and Jerry thus went on to tie Walt Disney's record in the category, and it was a personal win for Barbera because Disney did not hire him. When asked about his relationship with Disney, he said, "The only relationship that I remember is, I think, that we won 7 Oscars. During that period, I don't think he won that many. And he wondered who the hell those smartasses were that were winning these Oscars." But creating every short was a painstaking and expensive process. See, back in those days, the duo did not have a script ready according to which they would animate. This was the norm for American animation during the era. So Hanna-Barbera would first come up with an idea for a short, and then flesh out the story using storyboards, character designs, and animation layouts. Hanna would do the animation timing, plan the musical beats, decide the accents the animation would occur, and assign scenes to animators, whom he supervised. He even voiced Tom's screams during this early stage. They would have about 6 weeks to prepare each short, and day by day it was becoming more expensive, ranging from $45,000 to $65,000 for each short. Though Quimby barely had any creative input, he was still hailed as the producer of all cartoons until 1955. The situation deteriorated, and the MGM Animation Studio had to start cutting the budget for Tom and Jerry cartoons because the revenue from theatrical screenings was dwindling with the rise in television. To deal with this issue, MGM ordered that all new shorts should be produced in the widescreen CinemaScope format, and the first to be released under this format was Pet Peeve in November 1954. Tom and Jerry also followed this from 1955 to 1958. However, the studio discovered that reruns were earning as much as the new ones, so why spend money on producing new shorts? And the axe fell on Tom and Jerry in 1957. Barbera told the Washington Post, "We were at the peak of animation, doing 16 shows a year, and they called us up and said they were closing the studio. The economy was bad, and they found out that by reissuing the old cartoons, they could make almost as much money, which was the stupidest move they ever made in their lives, and one which they later regretted." William Hanna also shared his shock and disappointment by saying, "We were shocked. I think both of us felt that this was where we were set up for the rest of our lives. Everything was going great, and all of a sudden, wham, it closed." At the end of this era, Tot Watchers was the last short produced by Hanna-Barbera, which was released in 1958. This short revolved around Tom and Jerry trying to take care of a baby, whose nanny, Jeannie, was busy talking on the phone. They tried to keep the baby safe in the pram, but failed repeatedly as it kept on escaping, and at one point it entered Spike's doghouse. Tom brought the baby back to Jeannie, who misunderstood the situation and beat Tom. After this, he gave up, but when the baby crawled into a 100-storied construction site, Tom and Jerry had to intervene and, after a whole lot of ordeal, managed to bring it back. Meanwhile, Jeannie had informed the police, who arrested Tom and Jerry thinking they were kidnappers, but when they saw the infant crawling again, they realized that it was Jeannie who was negligent, while Tom and Jerry were the saviors. At that time, MGM was already planning to shut down their animation studio, while Hanna-Barbera started the company Hanna-Barbera Productions, even before finishing the remaining Tom and Jerry cartoons. Tot Watchers, which was released in 1958, became the last Tom and Jerry cartoon produced by MGM. What happened when MGM tried to replace Hanna-Barbera? A couple of years after Tot Watchers' release, MGM thought of reviving Tom and Jerry, but they did not go back to Hanna-Barbera, and instead thought of replacing them, a decision that would not exactly work out. MGM reached out to a European animation studio, Rembrandt Films, to produce 13 Tom and Jerry shorts in Prague, Czechoslovakia. They were directed by Gene Deitch, who wrote most of the cartoons, sometimes with help from Lars Born and Eli Bauer. The Deitch shorts were produced using Metrocolor and returned to the standard Academy aspect ratio instead of CinemaScope. Surprisingly, Deitch was not a fan of Tom and Jerry, thinking it depicted meaningless violence, but when he was assigned the work, he realized that no one really looked at them as violence. Rather, they were seen as a parody of exaggerated human emotions. Now, the Deitch and Snyder shorts were nothing like what Hanna-Barbera created. Firstly, neither of them had seen enough entries of the original cartoon, and secondly, they were given a meager budget of $10,000. Of course, the resulting films were extremely different from what the OG had envisioned and given us. The animation was restricted and seemed more jerky. Oftentimes it also used motion blur, and the dialogues were mumbled rather than being clearly spoken. Moreover, Deitch made shots where Tom and Jerry would generally be put in exotic locations like the jungles of Nairobi or a 19th century whaling ship. If you look at those shorts, you'll see that everything that made Tom and Jerry seem relatable and close to us was missing. However, some people like the surrealist nature of these shorts, and I get it. The art and background seemed fascinating at times. Deitch also did not use Mammy Two Shoes and instead introduced it with an overweight, bald, short-tempered man who was Tom's owner, and both he and Spike were portrayed more violently, something which audiences received poorly. Deitch also took careful steps to avoid being linked to communism. He altered the Czech names of his crew in the opening credits. For example, Stefan Konacek, who provided the music, became Stephen Konacek. But still, these shorts did not carry the Made in Hollywood USA title. They produced a total of 13 cartoons which were a commercial success, yet MGM chose not to renew their contract. The last of their entries, Carmen Get It, was released in December 1962, which was centered on Tom following Jerry into a New York opera house and wreaking havoc on a live performance. But none of their shorts got an Oscar nomination, and in hindsight, many fans consider these to be the worst of the Tom and Jerry cartoons. Deitch's Tom and Jerry shorts did not reach a story conclusion, but were forced to move away when MGM decommissioned them. In a way, their Tom and Jerry too died prematurely. In the 2015 DVD, Tom and Jerry, the Gene Deitch collection, Deitch said, "I hardly had a chance to succeed. They could all have been better animated, truer to the characters, but our T&Js were produced in the early 1960s, near the beginning of my presence here, over half a century ago as I write this. I well understand the negative reactions." Tom and Jerry came under Chuck Jones. Chuck Jones is an instantly recognizable name for fans of Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies. He worked with Warner Brothers cartoons for over 3 decades and delivered these gems before starting an animation company of his own, known as the Sib Tower 12 Productions. After a few projects of their own, Sib Tower 12 was contacted by MGM to create new Tom and Jerry shorts in 1963, and Jones and his partner, Les Goldman, made 34 Tom and Jerry shorts under this contract. Jones also produced 2 separate MGM animated one-shots during this period. However, it was not easy for Jones to shift his animation style overnight, so he had to redesign the characters to fit his own type of cartoon making. As a result, this was the era we got Tom's big eyebrows to make his frustrated looks more prominent. Jones stated, "I wanted to do cat and mouse, the whole idea, so we designed the cat, so we started doing it. I remember the sketches as I made them." Similarly, Jerry was given larger ears and bigger, innocent eyes to make him look cuter. And as much as I love Hanna-Barbera shorts, I have to admit that if there was someone who did justice to their characters, it was Jones and Goldman. Still, they could not reach the benchmark that the OG duo had created, and one of the main reasons for that was that Chuck was not rehashing what Hanna-Barbera did, the whole chaotic chasing and slapstick violence. Rather, he wanted to treat Tom and Jerry like the characters at Warner's, but that didn't really suit the comedy we were used to. Still, I loved the doe-eyed Jerry more than anything. But if you look closely, you can see that some of Jones' Tom and Jerry had clear influences from Wile E. Coyote and The Roadrunner. The gags about characters falling from high places and blackout jokes? Jones has himself acknowledged it and said, "I didn't do Tom and Jerry very well. Mine were more like The Roadrunner and Coyote in drag, I guess. But I tried hard and I really cared about them, trying to make them right. But I was really over there because that was the only place available at the time that would allow me to do character animation." Chuck co-directed most of the shorts while Maurice Noble worked as the layout artist. Some of the shorts were also directed by Abe Levitow and Ben Washam. Jones's shorts earned a trademark because they altered the opening credits with Tom appearing trapped inside the O of his name after the MGM line. But once again, MGM pulled the plug. By 1967, theatrical shorts had become almost obsolete, and though MGM tried to resurrect Tom and Jerry twice after Hanna-Barbera left with a lower budget, the upsurge of television program was not something they could compete with. And finally, Jones' run of Tom and Jerry came to an end with Per Chance to Dream. And this episode somewhat felt like a closure, not gonna lie. It started with Tom waking up from a nightmare where a giant bulldog was turning him into a nail and hammering him into the ground. Panting, Tom spotted Jerry carrying a bone and, of course, got to his business immediately, chasing Jerry. But Jerry ended up leading him straight to a doghouse, and Tom was instantly reminded of his version of Freddy Krueger, the bulldog. But surprisingly, he found that there was no giant bulldog inside, but a little one, who, by the way, was equally dangerous. And guess what? He and Jerry were a team, and the dog protected Jerry every time Tom tried to catch the mouse. But Tom refused to give up and kept on trying one trick after the other. He attacked the tiny menace with a hammer, covered himself in dog repellent to keep the pup away, and even stuffed him inside a freezer and buried it deep underground. Sure, some of these tricks seemed to work, but only briefly, because the bulldog always bounced back, and no matter what Tom did, he could not harm Jerry. Finally, during the big showdown, the bulldog almost chewed Tom to nothing before pounding him into the ground, and Tom realized his nightmare was turning into a reality. Finally, he accepted defeat and gave up chasing Jerry. He then put on some soothing music, swallowed a few sleeping pills, and dozed off to sleep. Because, in hindsight, dreaming about giant bulldogs was far more peaceful than dealing with the real little one. And with that, Tom and Jerry's theatrical run came to an end, and the franchise began a new phase on television. The second phase of Hanna-Barbera's Tom and Jerry. Nearly 2 decades after Tot Watchers, Hanna-Barbera got to make more Tom and Jerry. They created 48 new shorts for ABC's Saturday mornings, but instead of getting a series of their own, these films were sandwiched between other characters of the duo, like Grape Ape and Mumbly, which was a part of the Saturday morning programming blocks. The new Tom and Jerry segments originally premiered between September and December 1975, while the package continued airing on ABC through September 1977 through reruns and repackaging. This was the time Tom and Jerry were introduced with a red bow tie and changed into non-violent companions who went on adventures together. Hanna-Barbera had to do this to follow the strict rules against depicting assault on children's TV. Apparently, when some of the original theatrical shorts of Tom and Jerry were screened for the ABC executives, they enjoyed it thoroughly, but then went like, "Oops, it's a shame that these won't meet the network broadcast standards and practices, so we won't be able to play the original shorts." And when they later talked to The Guardian about the claims of violence in the show and how they were being called out for it, Barbera said, "It's like saying Charlie Chaplin films are pornographic. It's the sort of humor circus clowns purvey. No one gets hurt, they always bounce back." Yes, despite portraying Tom and Jerry in a more friendly manner, newspapers reported it for being brash. See, this was after a time when parents and children advocacy groups like Action for Children's Television, or ACT, had already talked about the growing concern regarding action in kids' TV shows. And headlines like these did not help Tom and Jerry's situation. Then, Susan Futterman started managing the children's programming department from late 1976 and acted as ABC's internal censor. Futterman decided what was appropriate and what wasn't, and as a result, when ABC was offered a package of 90 Tom and Jerry cartoons, she turned down the deal and said there was a lot of blatant violence in the program. And thus, Hanna-Barbera stopped making any new shorts for ABC. Another era came to an end. And you know what's the most ironic part? ABC kept on rerunning the cartoon till September 1977, and as such you don't even have a final goodbye from this series. The show simply faded when it was finally removed from the channel's Saturday morning lineup. Hanna-Barbera were frustrated, quite understandably. Barbera told the Evening Herald, "We ran into a stone wall because some citizens for the protection of the children of the world have decided cartoons are evil, that they're violent and full of mayhem." Then, once again, a couple years later, Filmation tried to recapture the magic of Hanna-Barbera's original Tom and Jerry. The studio was commissioned by MGM Television to create a Tom and Jerry series, and the Tom and Jerry comedy show debuted in 1980. It had new cartoons as a part of it, namely Droopy, Barney Bear, Spike, and Slick Wolf, who returned after their original MGM shorts. Filmation decided to use the classic chase formula of the initial shorts, but delivered it in a more slapstick, humorous manner. Still, it was not well received by the audiences. As a result, the show remained on CBS Saturday mornings for about 2 years and then was pulled down from the air. Moreover, only 45 new shorts were produced, and all new episodes premiered between September 6th and December 13th, 1980, which means, for the later years, it kept repurposing the old shorts. Later Tom and Jerry eras. One thing we have to keep in mind before going into the 90s is that in 1986, Ted Turner of WTBS purchased MGM, and though he sold the company later, he retained MGM's pre-1986 film library, which means Tom and Jerry were now property of Turner Entertainment Company, and it has remained with Turner's successor, Warner Brothers. That's exactly how we got Tom and Jerry on TNT, Cartoon Network, the WB, and Boomerang, because they were Turner-owned networks. So when Hanna-Barbera returned with the idea of babyfication of the characters, which gave birth to the Tom and Jerry Kids in 1990, it was co-produced by Turner Entertainment Company and debuted on Fox Kids, which aired for 4 seasons. However, over time, Fox began squeezing it out as the block kept adding higher priority new titles to each fall season. So the weekday lineups between 1993 and 1994 gave rise to shows like Tiny Toon Adventures, Animaniacs, and Batman the Animated Series, which increasingly took over the prime 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock p.m. slots. By its final season, Tom and Jerry had been pushed to less prominent slots before being finally dropped in 1994. However, even after cancellation, Turner picked it up for reruns on Cartoon Network, which had launched in 1992, where Tom and Jerry Kids began airing in 1995, and the Cat and Mouse found a home on that network till 2007. But if you think about it, once the Filmation run ended, Tom and Jerry did not get another new short until 1990. Tom and Jerry had no new shorts. And soon movies started happening. It started with Tom and Jerry the Movie, 1992, the only movie produced by Hanna-Barbera Productions, along with Turner Pictures and Film Roman. But then from 2001 onwards, we started getting direct-to-video movies like Tom and Jerry The Magic Ring, 2001, Tom and Jerry Blast Off to Mars, 2005, and others. After Hanna passed in 2001 and Barbera's role was reduced to story credits on a few projects before he died in 2006, every new Tom and Jerry movie had been produced entirely by Warner Brothers Animation. And we all know these animations, the gags, nothing hit the same anymore. Tom and Jerry was lost. Sure, we kept on seeing them on the screens, but the essence and the humor, it did not touch our hearts anymore. And what Barbera said back in 1993, they don't make them funny anymore. It's all dialogue now. To get laughs, it's got to be visual. The thing people forget is that we never made Tom and Jerry for children per se. We made it for nighttime screenings in theaters around the world. There were hard gags which some people interpreted as violence, which it wasn't. It was slapstick. Still makes sense. Tom and Jerry was their baby. No one really had the right to toy with it, but business decisions and changing times kept reshaping the IP. I understand the world has changed and technology has evolved, and putting the characters in an era-appropriate context made sense, but sometimes old is gold, and Tom and Jerry was one such brand that probably did not need modernizing. It was a subtle reminder of how our childhood used to be. How things were, you know. And as far as the younger generation is concerned, maybe introducing them to the original Tom and Jerry could be our way of taking them back in time. A tiny way to make them walk in our shoes and see the world as it was decades ago. So, to answer the very question with which we began, how did Tom and Jerry show end? Well, it died multiple times before being forcefully reinvented by different creators. Some wanted to try to preserve its legacy, while others tried to reinvent it for a new generation. Sometimes those experiments worked, and sometimes they really didn't. In my opinion, Tom and Jerry ended the day Joseph Barbera and William Hanna walked out of MGM Studios. The later incarnations they created could not reflect their vision clearly and were creatively limited. And in that sense, for me, Tom and Jerry, the way it was created, truly ended with the close of the Hanna-Barbera MGM era, whose final theatrical shorts reached audiences in 1958. That's all we have for today, guys. It aches my heart to realize creators as brilliant as Hanna-Barbera had to go through so much trouble when all they wanted was to bring harmless fun to kids. About the violence, I don't see it that way. except that they were just mindless, over-the-top slapstick gags. But I understand if anyone looks at them differently. Anyway, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you like this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!